As a harbinger of diversity, Justin Trudeau tries to appease every group in society. What does he find in return? Well, every group despises him. Here he is, talking to the Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa. And was his government hammered?
Nipinac for inviting me and us to be here with you this morning. But thank you all for inviting us once again to be part of these important meetings. It has been many years that we've been coming to these and having these important conversations, and it is always a privilege to hear directly from you, in addition to all the conversations we end up having across the country in various places on so many different subjects. But it's
so typical of a politician. They're always having important conversations. Like, could you imagine going to work, to your job one morning, and your boss asks you, "What are you doing today?" And you go, "Oh, I'm having important conversations." It's like, yeah, but are you doing actual work? Well, I'm having important conversations, right? You would be fired from your job very quickly, and rightfully so. But that's not the case with government.
Really important for me and for the ministers to show up and take questions. So I'll just give a few remarks, and I'll turn it to each of the ministers, who will speak very, very briefly because we know we want to get into questions from all of you. Back in 2015, I made a promise to change the approach the federal government in regards to Indigenous peoples. And
so you broke that promise, but anyway, what else is new?
First Nations. I promised that we would be there as a partner. I promised that we would take on a new way of working together that involves showing up, that involves welcoming you to be part of the conversations and the processes as we move forward, recognizing the challenges of decades, generations, and indeed centuries of colonial thinking by a federal government that didn't see Indigenous peoples as full partners and even viewed them as second-class citizens.
Trudeau used this sort of language to trick all of these groups into voting for him. Back in 2015, he promised big change and new progressive movement, and wouldn't you know it, after 10 years, it's been proven that all of Trudeau's promises for this new utopia where everyone's included in the governmental promise or the governmental act of ruling a nation has been completely debunked. Clearly, it was a lie. And in this case, you don't have to take my word for it. All you have to do is watch the entire conference. Every speaker that comes up to the microphone is incensed with Trudeau's government. Didn't keep your promise, they say. We voted for you. You haven't changed anything, and so on.
This is the essence of reconciliation, understanding the work that we need to do together as partners in both building a future, but recognizing the impacts of the past on the present at the same time.
Haven't you had 10 years to fulfill this goal of yours already? What have you been doing for the last 10 years? Crushing Canada is the answer, but...
And we laid out a better path forward: respect for First Nations sovereignty, true nation-to-nation relationships, and an unwavering commitment to truth and reconciliation.
Typical diversity. All it is words, and more words. Big fluff, lots of fluff, so as to appease those who are upset with the government at the particular time. And then when push comes to shove, it turns out all of those promises and all of those commitments that these government members make are just paper mache. They crumble. They dissolve so quickly. But of course, the next time they get into power, they say they're going to change things. Then they'll change things.
Il fallait absolument qu'on change l'approche du moment qu'il a changé et d'exiger de advocacy with 15 de changer avec les peuples autochtones dans ce pays, et c'est quelque chose sur lequel ce gouvernement a travaillé fort. And because of your leadership and advocacy, we've accomplished a lot together. Particularly, highlights from this past year include establishing the National Council for Reconciliation. We are very close to passing the bill on the right to safe drinking water, C-61. We recognized Haida Nation's right to self-determination with C-16, and proper accountability and implementation of modern treaties being critical, which is why we've appointed a commissioner for modern treaties. We also recognize the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls situation remains a national emergency. We partnered with Manitoba so far on a red dress pilot, but there's much more to do. On police treatment of First Nations, we recognize that no one should feel unsafe in their communities, and that is the reality for far too many Indigenous people across this country. We need to do better collectively. I know we are engaging on that particular subject, and as well continuing the important conversations on developing First Nations policing so that you can be directly in control of your community's safety.
So, as is typical of government, Trudeau uses big, long words with fancy names to try and dilute the reality of his governance, of his failure to govern appropriately, righteously, justly, to keep his promises, and so on and so on. Orwell has an excellent essay on this. He talks about the politicization of the English language and how government members and so on will use words, big words, long words. We have to be proactive. We have to set forth a new and innovative idea. We have to push these modern, progressive policies, etc., that mean nothing at all, but they sound fancy and so are meant to satiate an upset population.
Above all, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples remains a guiding principle for everything we do across government. But of course, for all that we've been able to do together, there is much more to do. And I feel the same urgency as you do to move forward, because every day that goes by, there are more problems that we haven't resolved, and there are more issues that we need to keep working on. But as we do it...
Crazy how there are supposedly more problems under a government that promises to solve them. What a strange paradox. Trudeau says, I've come in 2015 to solve the problems that we're having in this nation. And now in 2024, coming into 2025, he goes, there are more problems every day. That's strange. Weren't you supposed to solve them?
As we do it together, we will continue to show up. We will continue to listen. We will continue to work with you as true partners in the future of this beautiful land that we live on. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
If there's one thing you can guarantee, it's that Trudeau is not going to work together with everybody. Instead, he exists in his little cabinet, right? He has that isolated group of bureaucrats that he works with. That's it. That's all. This whole fantasy of the Liberal government bringing in everybody to have this diverse form of governance is a lie. Total lie. It's the complete opposite. It is isolated, small, cut off from the rest of Canada. Those bureaucrats live in their own fantasy, in their own little world, and all of these people that Trudeau promised would help in the governing process, right? Most of them wide-eyed liberals and so on were tricked. They were deceived, and now they're seeing the truth. So after the rest of these ministers speak, we won't go through it because it's a long, long talk. Members get up and begin asking Trudeau questions, and they begin actually chastising him for his governance and for the way he's ruled. Now, the actual arguments that are provided, and anyone can watch them. I'll put the link in the description. One may or may not agree with them whatsoever. The point here I wish to make is that Trudeau's diversity, his promise of diversity, collapses in on itself. He promised all of these specific groups and individuals that he would promote this culture of diversity and that he would care about the minorities and so on. And yet when push comes to shove, the exact opposite is true. And so all of these groups that Trudeau catered to or pretended to cater to for how many years are seeing the light for what it is, and they're furious about it. What we mean to show is that, again, if you try to appease every single group, no group will like you. None of them will like you. They'll be disappointed, and they'll be reviled at your very presence.
Thank you, Proxy Crowdchild. We will now take a question on the Zoom. Chief, I will now let Prime Minister Justin Trudeau answer the question.
Yeah, I'll briefly start and then pass it over to the ministers. First of all, there's a really, really important reflection that everyone in this room has to have about how Indigenous peoples, how First Nations specifically in this case, want to organize themselves. It is not for the Government of Canada to say who should speak for whom. And that is something that we have been there as...
But apparently it's for the Government of Canada to pass online censorship bills. Stuff like that.
A partner in resourcing and investing in helping reflect on how you choose to govern yourselves and organize yourselves.
This language that government is a partner with any organization, for that matter, with any group of individuals, is nonsense. Everyone knows it. Government loves to preach this idea that we'll just walk hand in hand together into the fire and then we'll emerge victorious. Nope, not the way it works. Not the way it works. Government is over us. They love being over us and they want to stay in that position. There is no equality in this particular sense. Not at all. Just look at the way government governs themselves. They don't govern themselves. They give to us all of these laws that we have to follow, but at the same time, none of them have to follow the laws. It's like the Pharisees, right? The Pharisees, oh, we're working with Israel. We're one with Israel, walking with them. And then when you investigated the Pharisees and what they were doing, you discovered that they followed none of their own laws that they demanded everybody else to follow. The exact same with Trudeau and his Liberals.
The AFN exists as a body that has gathered you here in Ottawa. If you want to look at something other than the AFM as a way of organizing yourselves, we will be there to work with whatever you decide is right for you. The time when people in Ottawa, however well-meaning, can decide how you must go about organizing yourselves is long past, and that's a good thing. That's why there are many nations across this country who have stepped out from under the AFN, stepped out from under the Indian Act, and are choosing to sign self-governing treaties with us. And our goal as a country is to end the Indian Act, to see it finished, to see every First Nations community, every First Nations nation, every Indigenous community and nation determine what kind of relationship you want with the federal government and with Canada.
Trudeau has lied so many times that no one can take him seriously. No one can take what he says seriously. He might say thing Y, but why should anyone believe he's going to actually do thing Y or is going to pursue thing Y? Because look at his record. His record is a litany of lies, of proven lies. What he says he doesn't do. It's almost at the point now where if Trudeau says something, you know the exact opposite is going to happen.
So I know over the past number of years, the fact that after decades of federal governments not showing up, after decades of federal governments not putting money on the table, not in any substantial way like we have over the past 9 years, the imperative was very much on just being seen. But now you are working on, as you need to, figuring out what the path forward is for the next generations of engagement with the federal government. And we are here as a government to work with you on that. And it's not easy because, quite frankly, for generations, nobody has given you the space, nobody has granted you the legitimate and even recognized your legitimate rights to determine your own
So here is Trudeau continuing to appease. Nothing new.
future. We are here to say, we're working with you, we want to know, and it won't be easy and it won't be quick, because these are things that will impact deeply on your communities, not just now, but for generations, as you well know.
No, it's never quick. It's government. Of course, it's not quick. It's a slow process. The longer government can drag it out, the better, of course, as far as they're concerned, because it means longer terms of power for themselves. If you say to these communities, if you vote us out, if we're voted out, there will be no one to help you, then those communities feel as though they have to keep voting you in. And so the longer you exercise your help, the longer they'll continue to keep you in power. So Trudeau answers a bit more, and then they go back to questions. This, I thought, was the best question of the conference. Here's what the individual had to say.
Dog and Mohawk territory. My questions are, when I was elected in 2021 as the Grand Chief of my community, I ran on a platform of transparency and accountability and inclusion for my community. And I began an investigation of fraud into the pandemic spending of my community's council back then. It's been 4 years now that investigation has been going on, and it's with the Sûreté du Québec who's leading the investigation. And the federal government has yet to be involved in that investigation. It's coming to a close now. It's had 3 extensions, and I have yet to hear from the federal government on what they think about their money being spent. Almost $6 million was sent to my community, and $3.5 million that went into salaries. One person was earning up to $27,000 every 2 weeks on her salary. As of
I appreciate this gentleman's commitment to seeing that transparency and fiscal responsibility is actively encouraged where he lives. But of course, as honest and as appropriate as his grievances are, and as proper as it is to direct it to the Prime Minister, everyone knows, and I'm sure this gentleman knows too, everyone knows that this is a futile exercise. What's Justin Trudeau going to do about fiscal corruption, monetary corruption? Trudeau himself is monetarily corrupt. He's physically corrupt. This gentleman talks about one of the, I believe it's a vice chief, earning $27,000 every 2 weeks, money paid by the federal government. $27,000 every 2 weeks. And it's like, that's bad. That's terrible, of course. But then it's like, look at the federal government. Look at how they're paid. Look at how they make sure their pockets are lined. Look at how they make sure their bank accounts are full and healthy and fat. So this is no surprise whatsoever. And the fact that the federal government refuses to step in, or at least actively engage in this so important an issue, is another clear condemnation of their refusal to pursue justice.
Vice chief in my community, and I have nothing to hear from anybody on your side, Mr. Prime Minister. I would like this investigation to come to a close and that there be retribution for my community, that these people be prosecuted and not swept under the rug. I want that done for my community. Also, and this fraud investigation, for your information, was put up to embezzlement now. It's been upgraded, not by myself, but by the investigators. So I really hope that there's retribution for my community. Secondly, political interference by your ministers into my communities and Mohawk Council's ongoings and our toxic environment. Your minister, Ms. Adju, had sent a letter to my council recognizing their quorum over me, the elected spokesperson and Grand Chief of my community, and giving them that recognition of government authority over my community. My community is a custom band. We're not Indian Act. We don't follow that. We follow custom. So I follow custom and I run under my people's authority. And I'm asking through my community that you ask and tell your minister to revoke that letter, recognizing my authority and spokesperson as for my community. I'm demanding that. Secondly, thank you.
So here is Justin Trudeau's diversity coming home to roost. All of the individuals at the microphone say at one point or another that they've invited Trudeau, they've invited his government, they've invited Trudeau, they've invited his ministers to come and speak, come and talk, and none of them have got back. None of them have attended any meetings or any of those things, which of course is to be expected from government. That's the way government works. Make all of these grand promises, talk about your commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion, talk about your commitment to sustainability, promise to be a person of the people and to walk beside them hand in hand wherever they go. And then when you're elected to power, all of it goes away. All of it goes away. And you retreat into your cabinet, or in Trudeau's case, you retreat underground or wherever it is when the convoy comes to Ottawa peacefully, and you begin to work in your own little group, in your own little world. This is the way big government operates. It's not as though the bigger they are, the more of them you see around. It's actually the opposite. The bigger government gets, the less government members you see, the less government workers you see. For all of them are hushed and moved away into massive buildings, huge buildings in which they work their hardest to completely crush Canada.